Amen.
Please be seated. So this last week, there have been some interesting social media developments. If you are like me and waste some or any of your time on social media. There was first, and near to my own heart, the beginning of pumpkin spice season on Tuesday. And so there were many posts of those of us enjoying our first PSLs. Some of us get them iced because it's just too hot down here in Florida. And then because pumpkin spice latte was getting all the fame, in comes Taylor Swift, deciding that she wants to be the center of attention on Tuesday. And she posts that she is now engaged. I was torn because I no longer knew which one to celebrate. One of the other things that was in media quite a bit this week was the conversation over the momentary change to the logo of Cracker Barrel. Did everybody follow this? Anybody have no clue what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So whatever side of the argument you are on this change, it was a big deal this week, right? And there were even posts that came out, things like, us pastors and priests could have taught Cracker Barrel something. We have learned not to change the sacred things, right? We have learned that the hard way when we have tried to make changes. The thing is, you mess with PSL season. You mess with the love of Taylor Swift. You mess with the love of the tradition of Cracker Barrel. People are going to get upset. Sometimes you just don't like change. Which had me thinking, because I'm currently in the midst of slowly making my way through this book with a group of us from our church, The Tears of Things. And it is basically a way of reading and appreciating and understanding what the prophets are saying to us. One of the things that came to me right away that I had, in all of my studies, had never really picked up before, is this idea that when you read the prophets, you really should read them through in one piece, not just as we're doing with Jeremiah right now, a little bit here and a little bit there, a lot missed out. But if you read it through in one piece, you begin to see that the prophets themselves go through change, whether they like it or not. We're all pretty familiar with the story of Jonah, right? Who would do anything to not go to Nineveh, to be the prophet that God is calling him, even gets in a boat, gets swallowed by a fish or a whale, all of that stuff, because he's trying to avoid, right? And so not only is he going to Nineveh to hopefully encourage change in their behaviors, he's got to work through his own change, and we see that through his story. So Richard Rohr argues that actually all of the prophets go through these cycles of change that are both inward and then outward in the communities that they are working with. And again, we hate change, right? And yet here we are, reminding ourselves that change is important. I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs really quick in hopes to kind of encapsulate what Richard Rohr is offering. If you read closely, you will begin to see a pattern I have long taught about the way we progress as human beings, from order into what seems to be disordered, and finally reaching some kind of reorder. Jeremiah, for example, starts as a true believer with his dramatic account of being called by God, which is order. But when his work as a prophet makes him unpopular among his people, he goes through a major resentment towards God. This is disorder. Only in the later chapters, after the Israelites return from exile, does he break into freedom and joyous conviction. This is reorder. Without this self-correcting path, we all become narcissists, falling in love with our own image in the water, Those who love order need to be humbled by the experience of holy disorder. Those working through disorder need the insight of reorder, plus a major respect for some basic order, and any new reorder will soon need a further disorder. It is the natural flow of grace for both our individual lives and the lives of our institutions. The prophets tell us that we can and even must trust this cycle of living and dying. Without this growth process, most of us believe our first presented order is all that there is. So it's this idea that we're constantly going through these seasons of change. And often what causes that change is some level of disorder. I've heard this before in church development theory. I've heard it before in other institutional theories. I've seen it in more individual theories too, about when we hit a crisis point. That is where the change will begin to happen. Even if you follow Richard Fowler's stages of faith, there is this sense that it's the crisis point, the disordering of your own faith at some point, or nowadays we like to call it deconstruction. That after we go through all of that, when we get to the other end, there is something beautiful. There is this new life, this new understanding, this new way of being that is fuller than ever before. But it's painful in the midst of that disorder. And I can't help but think, as we at Iota Hope are currently going through this mold crisis, that once again, we are in the midst of disorder. And we're trying to figure things out. And I can't help but hold on to hope that whatever it is at the other end of this will be better than ever. So what does this have to do with our gospel reading today? We have Jesus who comes to a banquet, who watches what's going on, and then tells these parables. First, this advice of better to be humble than to be shamed. When you show up at the party, don't assume you're the best of the best. Stay at this end, better to be lifted up than to be brought low. And then the second is this advice that don't just invite those that you like, who you know will invite you back, but invite those who are on the margins of our world. The lame, the blind, the crippled. And I see three disorderings mentioned in this, essentially. So bear with me, I hope I can explain this well. The first sense of disordering is in the act of humbling oneself. When we show up to a party, and we don't assume we're the key person, when we show up to anything in life, and we don't assume we're number one, when we show up with an attitude of humility, we're reorienting what's in here. We're reminding ourselves of our place in things. Richard Rohr would say that's important, but it's always important to have that foundational understanding, as I said last week, that we are beloved children of God, full stop. So we can be humble and still also know that we are loved completely by God, and that's all that matters. But at times to spend moments taking spiritual practices, acts of humility, so that we can reorient ourselves instead of focusing on ourselves, instead of being a narcissist, as we like to use that term these days. Instead of being a narcissist, we see our place in the world about us. We remind ourselves that we are not the only ones. So there's that reordering happening. There's also the reordering happening of society in this first parable, right? Usually you would think everyone's fighting for the position at the top. Nowadays, if we had a reception here for the bishop, wouldn't we all want to fight to sit and have time to talk with the bishop? The presiding bishop came, wouldn't we all want to fight for that position of getting to sit next to the presiding bishop? I have to say Bishop Sean's pretty cool. It's worth sitting next to him. He ordained me deacon, I am allowed to say that. But see, there I go. I'm putting myself in that position of higher because, hey, look at me. I was ordained by a presiding bishop, right? That's how we often just instinctually act. But if we say instead, you know what? I'm not the most important person in this room, and I probably don't need this conversation any more than anybody else. I'm just going to sit over here. I'm going to take a look out for who is by themselves, who no one is sitting by, who is lonely right now, and I'm going to sit by them. You're reordering the way we work as a community, as a society in that moment. You're causing disorder, a little bit of chaos, right? And in hopes that other people witness this, and they're maybe a little challenged by it, maybe a little inspired by it, and will begin to do a little mischief, a little disorder themselves, choose to seek out those on the margins instead of the presiding bishop. So those are two ways, simple ways of bringing disorder that changes things, and that in the end, hopefully we will have this reorder of society where everybody is loved and respected and feels like they belong. Isn't that what we want? That third, or the third place of disorder is what Jesus is mentioning in that second parable, the instruction to the host. Of when you invite somebody, don't invite the cream of the crop according to society's standards. Don't invite those who will invite you next week to their dinner party, right? Instead, go out and invite those who nobody else is inviting. Invite those who society is forgetting about. Not only are you reordering social structures in that moment, not only are you saying these people are important, but again, that disorder is going to happen in here too. Because all of a sudden you are sitting with Susie, and you are having conversation with Fred, and you are understanding that Pablo is an addiction, not because he chose it, but truly because his life as a child was filled with trauma, and he has yet not figured out how to break away from those demons. You will find out the person who is struggling as a single mother with 3 kids, that she is doing everything she can to provide for those kids. In fact, she's working 3 jobs. She's working way more hours than I am. When you sit and have conversations with those who are on the margins, all of a sudden they become real people. None of it is anymore an academic exercise, but it is reality, it is relationship. And through that getting to know people, you are causing disorder in yourself and in society because you are breaking down those misconceptions. And the reorder will be when there's no longer anyone on the margins. When all people are getting what they need, and all people are seen as if they are truly valued and cared for. We hate change. We like things the way they are. And yet, without change, there's a lot of crummy stuff still going on. We had another mass shooting in a school this week. Because we're more concerned about not changing certain things than we are about our own children's lives. There are kids out there who have now not only been in one school shooting, but who have been in 2. I'm scared to send my kids to school most days. Friday, I saw the sheriff's department over at the going room for a minute. Freaked me out. There's not an easy solution for whatever it is that we need to do as a nation, but we need to do something. So how can we as a community cause some disorder that will lead to reordering? so we can make the changes so that everyone can have a full chance at a full life as God has intended. I don't know the answers for that. I'm praying for some prophetic voices to step up and speak loud, because we need them right now. But I also pray that we collectively are saying, we're willing to go through the pains of crisis. We're willing to go through the pains of the disorder if it means what's at the other end is better than ever. We have to hope that that is possible, and we have to be living in that today.
Amen.